An MP tried to brand my dad with a ticket. One incident card and a safety clause flipped the room and forced a range policy with microdrills. Hit like, subscribe, and the bell. More crazy revenge stories are coming your way. When you grow up around bases, you learn fast that a single night can tilt a career. My father was a young Marine in the late 1980s, hands steady on the wheel, when a boxy white truck locked onto his bumper and turned every mirror into a sheet of glare. The high beams flooded glass and nerve. The road tightened into a tunneling ribbon inside a storm of light that felt personal. He eased off, then added a whisper of speed to shake the tail, but the truck mirrored him, inch for inch, like a hooked fish staying level. Then red and blue finally burst alive. The stop felt backward. The harasser played lawman. A lance corporal from the military police strutted up like he had roped a fugitive, and shaped the word speeding with a mouth that wanted a trophy. My father kept his voice even and said the truth. He had accelerated to escape a blinding tail. Backup arrived. A corporal read the scene, smelled the theater, and ordered the show closed. The paper ticket never landed, but the bitterness did. On base, a citation is not ink. It is a mark that can stall promotion, block quals, and stain trust with a quiet shadow. He stopped at the 24-hour canteen, hands still shaking, and slid 2 items into his pocket folder. A photocopy of a field contact slip stamped void by the corporal, and a diner napkin where he had written time, road, and the phrase white box truck. Artifacts like that matter. Memory is loud, but paper holds. He drove home with afterimages dancing over the dashboard and one vow in his head. If this was a game of lights and rank, there would come a day when rules, not ego, ran the room. The glare had felt like a hand on the back of his neck. He would learn the rulebook so well that the next time a hand reached, the page itself would slap it. Somewhere downrange, the range bell would ring for him, not for the kid with the badge and the spotlight. Would fate ever hand him that lane? By spring, he had moved to the rifle range as a coach, the kind of job that turns bluster into silence. On that concrete deck, rank strips off. Everyone is a shooter under identical rules, and safety sits above all. He loved the cadence of it. Safety brief, check bolts, eyes on muzzles, crisp commands snapped like chalk lines. He told me that on base a traffic citation could choke a career for months, but a safety violation could end one in a day, which is why the range was holy ground. The kid who tailgated him had tried to brand him with paperwork. The range would answer with procedure. He studied the qualification book until the staples squeaked, marking margins with pencil and oil prints. He underlined the paragraph that says no weapon moves off the line without a coach clearing the chamber. He circled the sentence that says the coach's call is final. He tucked 3 artifacts behind the manual's cover. The voided contact slip from the roadside, a photocopied calendar page with range coach eval dates circled, and a laminated card titled safety flags with red, yellow, and white notes. He was not plotting revenge. He was preparing to be uncorruptible. Every morning he checked firing points, ran his hand over splinter lines in the benches, and listened to the metallic cough of a bolt going home. The old glare still visited in flashes at the edge of his vision, but on the deck it had no power. Here, facts lived on scorecards and safety logs. All he lacked was a moment that tied the roadside to the firing line. He did not hunt for it. He adjusted sling lengths, taught breathing ladders, and waited. When Chance finally walked out of the staging shed in boots and nervous breath, would he recognize it before it recognized him? The roster for the week printed hot from the office copier and slid across the desk with the smell of toner. Halfway down the second column sat a familiar last name, paired with a rank that still sounded like borrowed authority. He tapped the line once, then twice, to be sure his eyes were not filling in ghosts. It was the same lance corporal, now a student on the firing line. My father walked to another coach and quietly asked to swap posts. No drama, just a pen motion on a clipboard, and the lanes changed hands. On the ready line, the kid stood with his rifle vertical, knuckles pale against the stock. The sun gave the barrels a hard blue. My father stopped at arm's length and spoke in a voice that belonged to procedure, not memory. "Do you remember me?" The kid's eyes flicked, then fell. A nod. No apology, no speech. "Good," my father said. "You have one chance. One lapse on safety and you are done for the day." The words were not a trap. They were the same brief every shooter hears, only sharper in the throat of the man who spoke them. He slid an artifact into his breast pocket where he could feel it when he breathed. The printed roster with the kid's name highlighted, dated, and initialed. He also tucked a blank incident log card behind it, the kind that records time, lane, and rule number if anything goes wrong. Then he took position behind the lane, eyes on muzzle and trigger finger, ears tuned to the cadence of commands and the small music of metal. The wind smelled like cut grass and powder. The old glare memory flickered and went out. Only the rulebook remained. The line stood by for the first string, bolts locked to the rear, safety flags fluttering in the breeze. Would the lesson arrive like a shout or like a whisper? The morning stretched into a braid of commands, recoil, and pencil ticks. The lance corporal followed every step like a man walking a ledge. At 200 he settled. At 300 he surprised even himself, calling wind with a small tilt of the front sight and a breath that steadied at the pause. My father did not deny him skill. He catalogued it. The scorecard showed neat clusters and a cadence you could drum with a finger. He watched the small things. Muzzle discipline when a hat brim itched, trigger finger parked straight on the receiver during a brass pickup, eyes up when a coach spoke, and the way his shoulders tensed just before the last shot of a string. Each pass he marked the safety box with a clean check and the time beside it in pencil. Artifact after artifact stacked. A scorecard dotted with circles, a time log with string starts and stops, a brass count sheet that matched ammo issue by line, and a small sticky labeled Lane 7 where he had written the shooter's initials. On paper the kid walked a perfect edge, and still the tension held like a wire. The memory of the white glare kept trying to bloom at the edges. He let it pass and returned to the front sight and the flag at the berm. On the final relay the sun rose to the angle that makes steel glow and sweat sting. Powder hung faint in the air. The gravel hissed under boots that shifted for position changes. The range quieted into that bright hush where one wrong movement could cost a thumb, an eye, a career. My father ran the end brief in a voice that cut clean. Clear rifles on command, show open chambers, wait for a coach to inspect, and do not step off until released. He walked the line slowly, eyes on ejection ports, fingers ready to insert a flag where needed, pen uncapped over the incident log card in his pocket just in case. 10 lanes, 10 rifles, 10 chances for discipline to be real. The whistle lifted. What breaks first today, patience or pride? It happened in the kind of blink that separates careful from careless. The lance corporal locked the bolt to the rear and showed the empty chamber, but before my father's eyes tracked the extractor and bore, the kid reached up, slapped the cover closed, and shifted a heel as if to step off the line. The sound was small, a metal kiss, but on a range it was the crack of a rule snapping. My father's voice cut the air. Stop. That is a safety violation. Off my line. The lane went still. Even the gulls seemed to hold a beat above the berm. The kid stammered, palms up, a protest already riding his breath. It was nothing, I was just... You were not released, my father said. Chamber stays open until I clear you. He pulled the incident log card from his pocket and wrote in block letters. Premature closure, chamber not verified, attempted to step offline. Rule cited, coach authority final. He added the time, lane, and his initials, then had the second coach witness with a tight signature. He photographed the card beside the safety flag for the day's file and tucked both into the clipboard. The shooter's face went from red to chalk. Pleading started, then anger, then the awful thin sound pride makes when it buckles. Please, I shot clean, this is one slip, he said. One safety slip is enough, my father answered. He pointed to the bench. Rifle down. Step out. A removal slip printed from the office later would join the log, along with the scorecard that suddenly meant nothing and the roster page with the highlight that had burned a hole in his pocket all morning. The line exhaled and the whistle pierced again. Qualification failed. Somewhere in the distance, the old glare finally went dark. What would that failure set in motion once the paperwork hit the desk and the rumor mill began to spin? He did not chase the kid down the stairs or savor the win. He walked to the office, sat under a humming strip light, and chose the rulebook over adrenaline. Decision first, then mercy with a witness. He opened a blank after-action memo and typed what happened in plain language, then stapled copies of the scorecard, the removal slip, and the incident log card. Next he slid a photocopy of the safety clause into the stack, the line underlined where it says the coach's clearance precedes movement off the line. He drafted an acknowledgement form titled Safety Violation, Remedial Path, offering remedial training within 2 weeks if the shooter signed, owned the lapse, and completed a short safety talk to peers. No apology theater, just a lesson that bent pride toward discipline. He printed 2 copies, dated them, and clipped them to a folder marked Lane 7. Before leaving, he placed the old roadside artifact, the voided contact slip, behind the memo not as fuel, but as context if a supervisor asked why his voice sounded like steel. He called the range master, asked for a brief with a second coach present, and booked the small conference room for morning. The final line of the memo read, "Decision taken on safety grounds alone." The pen dot dried like a period at the end of a year. Would he sign the remedial path, or would he spit at the page? Preparation looked like paper, but it moved the room. He printed a one-page drill called Chamber Open Discipline. A slow clearing sequence with photos of open bolts, and a bold caption that read "Do not close until cleared." He added a second sheet titled Bad Habits That Sound Small, listing cover slaps, muzzle sweeps at hats, and foot shifts off the line, each matched to the rule it violates. He slid both under a tab named Training and wrote a short agenda. Walk the line with coaches, demonstrate the drill, require signatures. For the meeting, he packed artifacts into the red folder. The after-action memo, the highlighted safety clause, the removal slip, the acknowledgement form, and the drill sheet. He also folded a note to himself. Your job is safety, not scorekeeping, not payback. At dawn, he brewed coffee and checked the conference room clock against his watch so the timestamps on the forms would agree. The range master arrived with a second coach and a legal pad. They read in silence while the compressor outside coughed to life. This is clean, the master said, tapping the incident card. Remedial path is fair, the second coach added, initialing the bottom corner. They signed as witnesses on the memo and on the acknowledgement form's witness line. A chair scraped in the hall. Boots approached. He placed a fresh pen on the far side of the table. Would the kid take the one road back or argue his way into a ditch? Execution was simple and stern. The lance corporal stood in the doorway like a man measuring exits. Have a seat, the range master said. My father slid the acknowledgement form forward and pointed to the underlined rule on the photocopy. Read that sentence aloud. The kid read it, voice caught on the word final. That is where you slipped, my father said. Safety first, score second. The range master spoke next. You are removed for the day. You may return for remedial training within 2 weeks if you sign this, complete the drill, and brief your peers for 5 minutes on what went wrong. The kid tried a different lane, blame. He has it out for me, he said, chin forward. My father opened the folder and placed the old voided contact slip down beside the fresh incident card. Years ago you tried to make a ticket where there was none, he said quietly. Today I am making a rule hold where it must. The range master kept a hand flat. This counseling is on safety alone, he said. And it stands. He wrote counseling, page 11 on a line at the bottom of his pad, then tore the sheet and slid it into a manila jacket. My father photographed the signed acknowledgement beside the drill sheet and the highlighted clause, then filed the stack under lane 7. The kid stared at the pen, then at the door, then signed a small angry loop where a flourish used to live. The range master countersigned and set a date 2 Fridays out for the remedial. Boots scuffed the threshold. Would humility stay long enough to learn, or quit at the parking lot? Consequences arrived as policy and as quiet ripples. The range posted a bulletin titled Safety is a Line We Hold, with a photo of an open chamber and a caption that said, We release you. You do not release yourself. Coaches carried pocket cards with 3 sentences to use at close, and every shooter initialed next to a line that read, I will not move until cleared. The lance corporal lost his qualification window and with it a board he had been eyeing. His supervisor signed the page 11 entry noting removal for a safety lapse and scheduled him for an extra watch that weekend instead of liberty. My father ran the remedial 2 Fridays later with 2 other shooters watching. The kid arrived on time, spoke 5 minutes in plain words about closing a cover too soon, ran the drill clean, and kept his eyes on the chamber like it held his next month in it. My father signed the completion and stapled it to the acknowledgement. The range master restored his slot for the next qual, not as a favor, as a process. In the binder, a new tab appeared, Microdrills, with the chamber sequence at the front. On the deck, coaches began using the phrase wait for the release as naturally as calling wind. At home, the old glare receded until it was just a story with a lesson instead of a wound with a pulse. A week later, a young private tried to snap a cover on instinct, and a coach's hand hovered over the port like a bar across a doorway. The cover stayed open. What else should change before the lesson fades under the noise of routine? I keep the memory of my father's choice where I keep my own shop rules. Front and reachable. He never chased spectacle. He built a guardrail and let the page do the work. In a place where one small lapse can tear months from a life, anger is a weak tool, procedure a strong one. Mirror the bad impulse with a better rule. Make sure the receipts land in the right room. Give one fair off-ramp with a witness and a clock. Then hold the line without gloating. Years later, when I hear a metal cover snap, I see his pen pause over an incident card and remember that safety is not a speech. It is a checklist you can run when your heart is loud. The range bell still rings in my head sometimes, and the old glare has finally cooled into something that teaches instead of burns. If someone on your floor ever tried to turn authority into a spotlight, what rule, drill, or script would make that light safer for everyone next time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next story.